Back in May, I traveled to the country's largest antique show located in Brimfield, Massachusetts. I spent 2 days hunting in the wild for fountain pens, stationery, and related items. I came away with lots of stuff. Let me show you right now. I'm Joshua Lax, fountain pen user, collector, a bit like Ollivanders, right? And all-around fanatic. In fact, I'm so obsessed, I started a business where I get to work with other people's pens. And now, I want to share with you everything I love about the world of fountain pens. From the new pens, to the old pens, the nibs, the ink, the paper, and of course, the people. This is Uncapped. So a few weeks ago, I got to go to the Brimfield Antique Market, which is up in Massachusetts. And the setup was my wife was going with one of her colleagues to shop for things for their company. And basically, I got to tag along. So while they were off buying whatever it is they needed, I went on the hunt for primarily fountain pens, but I was also looking for things like stationery items, desk accessories, and you'll see what I got shortly. But just to give everyone an overview, what is the Brimfield Antique Market? So Brimfield Antique Market is basically, if you think of like a country road in southern Massachusetts, and there's fields on either side. Those fields are filled with just like thousands of tents, and vendors set up their wares inside the tents, and you can walk around any number of these fields. There's like 21 of them. Each field where people set up is open on different days depending on the field. Some of them you have to pay to get into, others you can just walk right into for free. And it is massive. I think there's like, I don't know, there's thousands of vendors spread out over this thing. And at one point I even thought that I reached the end of the market, but then like I looked to my left and it seemed like, you know, tents upon tents were continuing. And the other thing to know about Brimfield is it's not really organized in any particular way, and the vendors range from people who clearly have like a high-end antique shop to people who are basically emptying out their garage and everything in between. People who clearly go to estate sales and just buy up whatever they want. Other people who are collectors or have specialties in various things set up. So it's really, and there's no organization where, like, you know, in a particular place, like all the people who do silver tea settings are set up or something like that. So I decided to go tag along on this and make my own adventure. And I spent about two days. We got there really early in the morning, and basically it was a lot of fun, and I bought a whole bunch of stuff that I'm going to show you today. I'm always looking for antique wax seals. It's another thing I love. The problem was, although there were antique seals around, as you can see, I just didn't find the right one for what I prefer at the right price. So like I said, you know, to some degree, Brimfield is kind of a random place. Like there's stuff spread out all over the place. Vendors have all sorts of things. So here we have most of my haul. And as you can see, it's a mixed bag. This actually will be using, wasn't a Brimfield purchase, but I'm going to take you through pretty much everything else. So let's get started. I'm going to move my 3D printed pen tray out of the way. So here is the first thing I purchased at Brimfield. And like I said, there was a lot of random stuff all around. So I walked into this guy's stall. He had random things. There was like a standing fish tank. There was Christmas decorations. There was pots and pans. I mean, it was a real hodgepodge of things. But sitting on one of his tables was this box. And when I saw the Parker logo right here, I said to myself, ooh, what is this? It looks old and it's from Parker. So I opened it up and it had in it this very nice ballpoint pen. I went up to the gentleman who is the proprietor of that stall, asked him how much. He told me a couple bucks. I was like, all right. I mean, you know, when I thought a couple bucks meant $5, I was like, okay, so what do you want, like $5? And he's like, no, a couple bucks. And he insisted on it only being a couple bucks, which was great. So I saved $3 over what I thought I was going to be spending. This thing cost $2. I'm not exactly sure which model it is. I kind of looked it over. There's some imprints down here. It didn't really say a specific model as I could tell. This may be like a Parker Classique, but I don't really know ballpoints all that much. So someone with maybe who owns one of these or had one or knows this type of ballpoint can tell me what exactly it is. So one thing I'll say, I didn't mention this before, pretty much everything you're going to look at, I didn't really do much to since I got it. So we're kind of trying things out together on here for the first time. So this, I believe the ballpoint refill is dried out, right? But that is not a big deal because it takes a standard Parker ballpoint refill. And I happen to have, just because I like the color and the weight of the line better, a Monteverde Parker style refill. I do like the Parker gel refills. This is a blue-black gel and broad. I bought a bunch of these from Amazon at one point, so it obviously fits. It's got the little waxy schmutzy business there, and then we can see that for $2 we have a very nice, I might use this all day today. It's very nice. So it has complete, completely working, ready to go. So let me throw that back in the box. Let me take this dead one. Let me know if you need a dead ballpoint refill. I'll have it for about the next half hour. And close this up. All right. So that is the Parker ballpoint I bought for $2. Now, actually, you know what? We'll need it back. So here, keep it with us. Okay. The reason I brought the pen back is the next thing I want to show you is totally something that's antiquated. I didn't even know what it was. It just looked cool. And then, well, I'll just show you. It had this tag on it. So this is an object that dates from, I don't know, a while back. It's cast iron, and the tag said business personal check embosser, the Pearl. And I think when it says the Pearl, it's referring to like that kind of like painted on branding right there. But from what I see, you know, it says check embosser here. By the way, I didn't pay $40 for this. It was less. A check embosser is kind of a misnomer because a check embosser is actually something else, I think. What this actually is what they call a check obliterator or a check protector. So the idea of it was that if you had a check, for those of us who remember checks, like my parents pulling out their checkbook, in full disclosure, I write checks too. But, you know, if you wrote a number on your check, and actually I'm going to do it this way to make it a little bit easier to demo. So let's say this is my check, and I wrote, you know, to John or Jane Smith, $1,000, right? And then I signed it, okay? What this object would do would basically imprint a texture into the paper so that someone couldn't come and try to actually change the amount or change the signature without actually destroying it, right? So what you would do if you were cutting the check is you would put the check in here, you would press down, and I totally missed it, but let's do it again. As you can see, I'm not used to obliterating checks. It's not part of my normal everyday practice, right? And then you would get this kind of texture in the paper. And if I wanted to do that to the signature, same thing. And it may be a little off because of its age, but basically you can see it put in this texture. And what that would do, as far as I can understand, is if someone tried to like remove the ink and re-sign it, like it would just create a complete mess, and you would know it was a counterfeit check. So something from a bygone era. Now you can actually just have your like banking app send somebody a check. But in the days where people were cutting checks and they felt they needed to protect it from counterfeiting, they used this device. And it's actually really cool. I mean, like for something with a very particular use, like it's particularly well made. There's some nice details on it. So I almost passed on this thing, but I felt like, you know what? That is super cool. Like, when else am I going to find it again? Probably there was someone else selling it for more. One of them, not in as good condition, so I went back and bought it. Related to the check obliterator is something that actually is still something that could be in use, and I'm going to lay it here. What is this object? Okay, well, first of all, it's damaged. I bought it knowing that. But this is what's called a notary seal. And what it is essentially is, let's see, what's the best way to line this up, right? So if I was signing a document and I needed a corporate seal on it, or I needed it notarized, which means that like, my identity is verified as the signer of the document, the notary or the person responsible at the corporation with a seal would put the document into this and then pull this lever, and it would press down and it would leave an imprint of what's in here. And actually this is perfect for our needs right now because it's missing the bottom plate. The top plate and the bottom plate marry, and you would be able to like imprint into the paper. I have other ones of these that are in better shape. This one, the aesthetic condition is, but you can see it's missing the bottom plate. But you can see in here I think it's the wire and metal separation systems incorporated. So it's a corporate seal. You sometimes see them with notaries. You often find them with church and parishes because they would seal records as well, records of birth, death, etc. And so again, this is something that's from a bygone era. I will tell you, as an attorney, notaries still exist, seals still exist. However, it's often just a rubber stamp that leaves like an ink imprint. No one really uses these things anymore. However, as an attorney, I am entitled to become a notary. And so I theoretically could figure out a way to replace this stuff and actually use this to notarize documents for other people. However, I don't think I'll actually ever use this one in particular. I just love the aesthetics of them. They're often cast iron. You can see it's a little dirty. I haven't cleaned it. But there's something really cool. I have at least one that has a lion's head, and it's like, this is a lion's head, and like the seal is coming out of its mouth. They had those at the show. People had them, but they were generally more expensive. But again, something unusual. I think I paid $10 for this one. There were ones in better shape that were around for more, but being what it was, I just grabbed it up. It's heavy, and it's like kind of cool. You put it down. Can stay like that, so you can leave it on your desk. It'd be cool if you could get a bunch of these and replace these with something more whimsical, and then we could all go around sealing each other's notebook pages or something. I don't know, maybe I just gave away $1 million business idea. In any event, so these are really the two like desk items that are not really related to fountain pens, but are nonetheless part of like what, let's say, a business setup might have on their desk back in the day. As an attorney, perhaps this actually would be what an attorney might have, because they were cutting checks, they were writing documents, their clients had to sign them, and then it had to be signed in front of a notary. If you were the notary, boom, you would seal it with this thing, and then you would bring it to whoever needed to receive the document. So that is kind of these two kind of cast iron, beautiful antiques. They're not in perfect condition. That is A-okay with me. They had a lot of character, and I was super jazzed to get them. They're both kind of heavy, so I was like carrying around in my backpack, hoping they wouldn't crush like anything else that was in there. And at some point I offloaded them just because I needed room and less weight with me. Anyway, so that's these two objects. Let me move them out of the way, and I will move on to the next thing. So there's one other desk accessory. I don't even know if it should be called a desk accessory. It definitely comes from a bygone era, and if this was a desk accessory, it's an error that, like, both by law and culturally we have long ago abandoned, and it is this. Now, I don't know if this is a pen stand. I don't know if it's a soap dish. I really don't know what it is. It's just like a brass, it could be an ashtray. I don't really know, but I'm pretty sure it belongs on a desk, and I'm pretty sure it belongs on a desk or other flat surface belonging to a man. And not just because of what you see in front of you, which is like the front side of this thing. It's actually the back side of it too. So obviously there was meant to be, depending on your point of view, something exploitative, depending on your point of view, something tongue-in-cheek. And, you know, I don't really know what the history of this thing was. I will say I acquired it at the Brimfield Antique Show. It is loosely perhaps related to what one might keep on their desk, depending on who they are and the lifestyle that they have. But nonetheless, here it is, a ashtray or pen stand or everything or nothing above, and it's really just a conversation piece for a select subset of the population. In any event, here you are. I know nothing about this, by the way. I didn't even try to research it, but it's just something else I picked up at the Brimfield Antique Market. One of my favorite vendors at Brimfield was this guy who sold vintage advertising and promotional materials. He had this really great wherever pens and pencils collateral, probably from a drugstore or something like that. It had some really nice details, like the pen and pencil there, the Life magazine logo. It was in great condition, so I picked it up, and now I have to figure out what to do with it. I have brought back my lovely 3D printed pen tray that contains the bulk of the writing instruments. Now, I kept the Parker and the box separate from all these because I want to sort of talk about all of them together as a group, and why I selected what I did. So, in Brimfield, there are actually a surprising amount of people selling fountain pens, and they run the gamut. And you'll walk up to a particular booth, and you'll see that there's like a pen tray stashed amongst other things, and all of a sudden you say to yourself, oh, let me go check it out, only to find that, like, one, the gold nibs have been removed, so you have a bunch of nibless pens, which may have a value to you for some way, but that's because people stripped the gold and sold it due to the high price of gold, thus eliminating some element of pen history. The other thing is that you'll find that, like, although at first glance they may look all right, but the pens have a lot of problems. Then there were people who were selling pens that were sort of in the mid-range. They were in okay user condition, and they may have a problem that you could fix. They might not have a problem to fix, but they were charging top money for it. Or it was something that it was in good condition, but it was so ubiquitous, like it wasn't really worth buying. And then there were the people that were, you know, more in the know as relates to fountain pens and other writing instruments. And they were, you know, charging an appropriate amount for a particular pen. And, you know, there might be a deal, but it was, you know, maybe not worth it, or, you know, there was other things to see or get. So the way I would describe it actually was like kind of like real life eBay, where in person you had things that were kind of running the whole different gamut of conditions and stuff, as you would when you're looking on eBay or Etsy or one of the sites, Mercari, etc. So what did I actually buy, though? Because I could have bought stuff in better condition. I could have bought stuff in worse condition. What I basically decided to do was to buy things that I would use, and it was at like a fairly inexpensive price, and it was something that was in user condition. I did not really want to buy, like you'll see, like I have a clip of a Parker 75 in good shape, sterling silver body, But for me, I have one, and I wasn't interested in just acquiring another one for the sake of it being there. The other thing you'll find is there's a lot of like pocket and vest pens, because I think those tend to be easier for people to find. You know, like if someone had a bunch of really nice pens, the kind of not normal, but like the bigger size pens get gobbled up, and the vest pens are harder for them to get rid of, or it's easier for them to find, what have you. And so that is sort of the lay of the land as it relates to fountain pens at Brimfield, and actually other writing instruments too. There were old ballpoints. I have old pencils here, which you could find old pencils all over the place in various condition, from various manufacturers. We'll talk about the ones I have here. But let's start over here with this Estherbrook. Now, this Estherbrook is in really bad shape, and I knew that looking at it, because I actually had to tell the vendor to take his pen. He had like 2 or 3 other fountain pens, and they were sitting in the sun. So you can see right here, like it's warping, and that's because this dude probably just there. You can see there's like a dip in the material, and when I take this off, you'll see that the section is actually loose. Sorry, that came out of focus a little bit. But basically, the color is nice, and, it's a shame that this guy basically allowed the sun to warp his pen. But nonetheless, things happen out there. I did go around telling various vendors what I thought they should do to protect their pens better. Not necessarily, in a spirit of I know more than you, but just, to be helpful. But basically, I bought this pen not because I wanted to have this pen. Although, again, the color is real nice. It is kind of eye-catching. But what I really wanted was the nib. And the reason I wanted the nib is because it is a 2284 nib. You can kind of see the number there. 2284, I believe, is the broad signature stub. And, you can kind of see it has like a stubby look at the top there. Let me just move that. This particular nib is pretty worn, I will say. However, I believe it writes, and I just was interested in the nib because it's a more specialized nib size. You could find Estherbrook's all over the place, some in really great condition, but this one was all beat up. Obviously, the pen is sort of starting almost like it was left on a radiator. So I bought this basically for the nib. I had a conversation with the vendor about the pen being all messed up, how I was honest what I was trying to do, and I proposed a price, and they accepted it that I thought was worth it. Basically, the big thing with these nibs, right? So you say, oh, you just bought a steel nib. Well, I bought a whole nib unit, and actually saw recently someone asking what is a relief nib unit. So basically, Estherbrook and a lot of their models at a certain point, they began selling these in these little units. So, and this is normal, by the way, to have that little seam there. Basically, what it is I believe, ebonite housing, an ebonite feed, and the nib. And they basically fit every model Estherbrook was offering at some point. So you could swap them out. I mentioned the number before, the 2284. 2284 denotes that the tip of this nib is actually not a ball, but it is a piece of sheet metal that is folded over, and that's how they create the tip of the nib. And that also explains a little bit of its boxiness. And if you see, and that I think is the 2 number at the beginning, that is what indicates it is like a folded tip as opposed to like a ball tip where there's like an alloy actually welded on to the nib. Those are the 9 series. So there would be something that corresponds to this, the 9284. But this one, just because the nib was very gunked up, I soaked it a little bit in preparation for this video. So I have here my Schaffer script ink. Why things are taking long to focus here. Anyway, let's give this one a try and see what we got. Oh yeah. A little scratchy from that wear. Like if you're at the high angle, it's like digging a little bit. But if you're at a lower angle, there is nothing wrong. And it's a little oblique as well. So as you can see, It's made for signing. Actually, I should have used this to test the check obliterator. But that is absolutely lovely. And to me, not perfect, but worth the money. I will have to look at this under magnification. Because it's folded, if you sand too deep into this, the whole tip is just going to fall apart. Sorry, let me bring it back into focus. So you want to be very careful if you're smoothing these. And some would say to you, you can't smooth them because of that feature. They'll just come apart on you. You'll just ruin the integrity of the nib. But it is very fun, and I do not regret purchasing it, because when you get to that sweet spot, it is lovely. All right, do not try this on the penny or the paper bag at all. Even if you were thinking of that, don't do it. So that is the Estherbrook nib that I purchased. I got the pen, but I really was purchasing the nib. One of the things I got into, like, as I was there was kind of like the vintage pencil scene that was at Brimfield. I am not a vintage pencil person. I like them. As you can see, I bought 3. But it ended up being something that was like fairly prevalent. There was a lot of interesting ones, and they were really fairly inexpensive, as you're about to see. You know, nothing here is, you know, like museum quality, I don't think, for various reasons. You could get really good ones. I mean, there was a lot of folks that I think had them because they sold jewelry, and because they're sterling silver pencils, there's gold filled, silver plated, etc. It kind of fit with like what they were selling. And then there were people obviously that just had random stuff, which included pencils. So let me talk you through my pencil purchase. They didn't all come from the same place, obviously, but I'm going to move this out of the way just because I don't want it to mess with the focus. All right, our first specimen is this pencil. This is a vintage Autopoint. Now, Autopoint actually exists today in a new form. The people who owned Autopoint originally, I think, went defunct. Then their descendants restarted the company, and they had all like the tooling and everything in the United States. And so like I have some of the revived Autopoint pencils. They're all marked made in the USA, stuff like that. In fact, the lead we're going to talk about is from them. It's right here. And then Autopoint, that revival went bust. And then Jonathan Valet, who is, first of all, fellow attorney. Second of all, great guy. Third of all, is probably one of the foremost pencil experts in the United States and maybe the world. Has purchased the Autopoint company and renamed it, I think, the American Lead Company or something like that. He makes his own lead now. They come in different colors. There's different densities, things like that. The other thing he's doing is he's still making models similar to this, but they're based, I think, on later models, although I haven't actually looked in a while, so he may be doing something that's more of a repro of this. I don't exactly know what this model is. Probably I could take it to Jonathan and he could tell me what it is. It has up here the name Autopoint. It is got some patent information. It says it's gold filled, which I think it denotes that all the metal parts are gold filled. I believe this burgundy maroon kind of marbled material is celluloid, but I'm not entirely sure. Again, I didn't research this completely. I'm kind of giving you what I just know generally about Autopoint and its history. But what makes the Autopoint sort of special is, and we'll talk about this part in a second, but basically what makes the Autopoint special, I believe, is this mechanism. So if you become versed in pencils and whatnot, you'll come to understand that different companies obviously made different lead mechanisms or lead advancing mechanisms. But from what I know, the Autopoint pencil had this rod in it, and this kind of flat area at the back of the rod would hook into a spot inside the barrel. And this front portion that has these two kind of teeth, sorry, I keep taking it too close to make it focus, I'm bringing it out of focus, so I apologize. These two teeth down here match the threading on this little tube here. So this is, I don't know if it's punched out or it's probably punched out. But basically what would happen is this screws in, and as you can see, the rod starts to go deeper and deeper into the head of the pencil. And then what would happen is it would advance all the way here, and you can kind of see that the end of that rod has now come to basically where the tip is. So you would have this in here. Now, this particular pencil is a little bit tight. It should turn a little bit looser. And as you can see here, like it's a little bit gunked up. Now, what I was trying to do earlier was I have a sunshine cloth. A sunshine cloth it's pretty much available at jewelry stores, jewelry supply places. You might find it in an art store. I believe that you can buy like packs of them on Amazon at this point, direct from Sunshine, or, you know, Sunshine sells through Amazon, what have you. But basically, when you see them new, they're yellow. And what they have in them is like a rouge. And rouge is a compound that helps polish metals. There's rouge for plastic. Any of the pen makers you might know probably use a rouge to polish parts of their pen at some point in the production thing, and you can actually polish pens with rouge using tools and stuff like that. What I was trying to do earlier was just clean this a little bit using this, because this is, I believe, as I said, celluloid or something like that. It's some sort of plastic from back when this was made, and I was just trying to give it a little cleaning to wipe off thing. And because this is a texturized cloth, it has the rouge in it, I thought maybe it could take off if there was like some sort of dried, I don't know what, outgassing detritus that kind of just caked on there. But you can see there's like a sticky gunk here. So I'll clean this, but what it was doing was making it hard to advance the lead, because it was the metal piece was catching on it. And actually, well, one way is a little easier than the other. All right, so what I am going to do, though, is I'm actually going to get lead that's going to fit this. Now, what you should know about vintage pencils like this is most of them took 1.1 millimeter lead. And so this, you can see it says Autopoint on it. This was from the Autopoint Pencil Company before Jonathan Vallée took it over, or Jonathan Vallée, sorry. And as a consequence, it does fit these things because it is made the same way the vintage lead was and the way his lead is made now. All right, so as you can see, it's a little long for this pencil, which is fine. But if you ever get into it where you need to adjust the length, you can thing. So let's see, will it advance? Did I send it backwards? Yep, I sent it backwards, right? So as you can see, as I turn it, it will actually advance the lead. And I go back this way. At some point it will stop. So it's gone too far. Oh, nope. There we go. That's probably all it's going to do. All right, let's give it a try. So here again is my Regalia by Endless sample. And let's see. So as you can see, I'm doing a little shading practice here rather than just some scribbles. The lead is new, the pen is old, but it works great. One other thing I just want to talk about is using the Rouge Cloth or the Sunshine Cloth to actually polish the pencil. So these parts I said were gold filled, right? So it's literally, It's like, I think, more gold than gold plating. It's actually like they fill sheets of gold, and I don't know the ins and outs of this terminology, but you can look it up. But basically, the Rouge Cloth will allow you to polish the metal parts. It'll allow you to polish the celluloid too. Like if I hit it with the celluloid, you can see it gets a little bit shinier. But the Rouge, sorry, I keep calling the Rouge Cloth. The Sunshine Cloth also polishes the metal, and that's really what it's for. Jewelers use it to polish jewelry. It does take off very minute, microscopic layers of metal when you're polishing. I mean, that's generally what all polishing is, and that's what the Rouge does. But as you can see, you use it a little bit, check your work, you'll restore some of that luster to the pencil. The last thing I'll tell you about this one is it actually does have like the old original 100-year-old eraser in it, and that eraser I do believe works. So I probably paid about $25 for this, and probably no more than $25. Is it in pristine condition? No, but it's something I would feel comfortable just like leaving in my drawer, picking it out and making notes, scribbles, what have you with. So that is the Autopoint. Next one I'm going to talk about is this Schaffer model. And this is also a gold-filled pencil. I don't know if it has an eraser on top. I'm a little bit reluctant to pull too much on the top of this. The reason being that I did not really investigate like all the facts and information that's probably on the internet somewhere about this mechanism. Again, different pencils have different mechanisms in it. I'm going to do a separate video about Wahl Eversharp pencils, and I'll show you that they have a completely different mechanism than that Autopoint we just looked at. I don't really know exactly how the Schaffer comes together. It's possible that it cannot be taken apart. They made pencils like that. At some point, it's also possible something's sticking, so I would need to do a little more research. But I'm a really big fan of the Wahl Eversharp design, and this is sort of like the Schaffer version of that. If you're unfamiliar with, basically Wahl Eversharps have like these nice thin bodies like this, and then there's like this like kind of flare out. There's a design at the top, and that is where you actually advance the lead from. Unlike the Autopoint where you turned here, this is one solid piece of metal. This is where you actually advance the lead, and you'll see that it does in fact advance the lead. And it is totally usable. So these pencils, that probably date back to like the 20s and 30s. I don't think they come from later. Are still perfectly usable if you're an artist or you just like mechanical pencils. You can get, a gold filled, you can even find sterling silver, solid sterling silver pencils, at a fairly inexpensive cost, and, have like this great antique thing to work with. The other thing was like the Autopoint, we can polish this up. So this, I got it. It was tarnished a bit. As you can see, I started to work this area here. This has this lovely like fluting design, like it's these nice lines that run the length of it. When we talk more about pencils in subsequent videos, I hope to be able to explain a little more how these things are made. But for today, you can just see that it has like a nice texture. You can also polish this using the Sunshine Cloth. And kind of around here, there was tarnish, which makes sense because that is in fact where someone might be holding it. So oils from your hands, sweat, etc. might collect there. But as you can see, as I use the Sunshine Cloth, all that comes out. Why am I mentioning this? It is mainly to make the point that with something as beautiful as this, if you look at it and you're like, that's really cool, except I don't know about all that gunk on there, odds are that you can just use a Sunshine Cloth that you can get for a few dollars from Amazon or a jewelry store near you or something. Even like a Michaels might sell them now or some version of it. And you can just polish it up and revive something from 90, 100 years ago to be able to use it. And that is really one of the reasons I went to Brimfield. So I could see there's a little marring there. I don't know if that's scratches. I'd have to look at it more. But as you can see, like, it is much, much more like it probably looked when it came out of the factory into someone's hands. And to me, that is always like one of the really cool things with the vintage writing utensils. All right, next up is this pencil. Now this, I looked at this and I said, hey, is this a vintage Yardo lead? For those of you, you know, some of you may know modern Yardo lead. However, Yardo lead has existed in previous forms for a long time. And, you know, this kind of follows the aesthetic. However, this one I actually checked out because I was curious about. It has this really cool, like, Corinthian... Is it Corinthian? I don't know. Someone who knows classical architecture, fact check me on that in the comments. But it has sort of like this, like, column-esque knob here to advance and retract the lead. And unlike the others, this actually will retract the lead. But it has here, and I'll see if I can get it to focus. It has a marking here, and I believe it is DRGM, and it then says 835 underneath. And what that means is that this was, well, I should say what that means. I don't know exactly, but like where this was made and everything. But the DRGM 835 are German industrial markings. And so DRGM is actually denotes that it was like made in Germany. I believe that hallmark was used like from the late 19th century into the mid 20th century. And the 835 denotes the silver content of this pencil. I found this pencil in a booth that, again, was a whole mishmash of stuff. There was nautical decorations, there was fishing stuff, there was video game equipment from a long time ago, you know, the Ataris and whatnot. And then there was just like a handful of writing stuff just sitting on a table. There were some pens and pencils. Besides this one, there was actually a couple box sets with fountain pens in it, I think including a wherever set, like my poster earlier in the video. But this one really stood out to me because, again, I was like, oh, is this a vintage Yardo lead? I don't think it's a Yardo lead. Maybe it is. I don't know enough about the history of Yardo lead to say. However, it really struck me as like exceptionally beautiful, and it was only $10, which was frankly crazy to me that something like this could only cost $10 and have like that silver content and everything. And it has this beautiful barley corn design in it. It is like hexagonal. It's got this really cool knob. And one of the really cool things about it is that it actually, as you can see, it advances the lead, but it also retracts it. And that you don't always see in mechanical pencils at all, or overall. Oh, look at that. It was actually coming out. I, again, do not want to pull on this stuff too much because I just don't want to damage the internals, because that, unlike, you know, replacing a sac or something or a diaphragm in a fountain pen, doing that with something like this, it's not as easy to find a mechanism that or pieces that are going to fit. So again, like the others, it totally writes. I think it's also 1.1 millimeter, which I think is fairly typical of vintage pencils. This one is maybe a different lead. You can actually see like the clay on it is sort of showing more than it does on the other leads, and it's got like a lighter color. I don't know enough about pencil lead to be able to make any of those conclusions, but for those of you who do, if you can see, the lead in this one is a little bit like it has more of a clay look than the other ones we were looking at before. And I don't know if this has an eraser. But that is my little pencil. I do not know who Martin John of Frankfurt is. I assume that that's Frankfurt, sorry. I assume that that's Frankfurt, Michigan, and not Frankfurt, Germany, although who knows what the MI stands for. If anyone has information, I love finding sources for things. So if you know anything about either Martin John of Frankfurt, Michigan, or Martin John of Frankfurt, Germany, or what Frankfurt/MI is different than my interpretation, please leave a comment below. It is much appreciated. So that are the pencils I got. Let's move on to the fountain pens. We've made it through the Estherbrook and the pencils. Let's talk about the two fountain pens here. And I'm just going to move this away again because I find it messes with our focus. So let's start with the blue and silver pen. Because well, we'll see which one is more exciting. So this came from a vendor, again, someone who kind of just specialized in random vintage Americana. I believe it's marked 21. You can kind of see it there in the glare. Let's see. That's not going to work. Let's see. See 21 right there. And I believe that this is actually a Parker Super 21. And the reason for that is it more closely resembles a Parker 51 without actually being a Parker 51. You see, generally Parker 21s look a little different. And this one has what they call a squeeze converter. Makes it super easy to fill. It actually makes it very easy to clean. This one, I think, is pretty good shape. It's not loose or anything like that. See, this one is made in the USA. Parker made pens around the world, as we'll see in a second. It's a little scuffed up, but, overall, it's a nice little vintage fountain pen. We will talk on this channel in more detail about the Parker 51 in all its glory. But just for now, let's just say that this is what they call a hooded nib, meaning the nib is concealed most of the way inside the hood. And there's the feed in here, and the ink collects up here. There's a whole reason these pens were designed that way. But again, I know I'm talking more in terms of a 51 right now. This is a Parker 21, but this resembles it. All right. Why did I buy this particular one? I generally don't buy Parker 21s, and the reason is because I find the nibs to be boring. People love them. They have great experience with them. It's a great entry-level vintage fountain pen because they're so ubiquitous and they can be gotten. They're easy to clean. Everything kind of just screws off. You use these squeeze converters, right? And they pump water through it, and you can clean it out. However, what made this one different is it has like this, it could be a medium, but it could also be a broad. One thing to know with vintage nibs, like they don't always mark what they are. And so, you kind of go on like look and feel like when you're writing. So let's dip this and test it and see what's the what. Dipping always gives it like a little bit more of a heavier flow, but let's see what we got here. Assuming it's going to write. Let's see. And it's not writing. Okay. As I said, I didn't test anything before. Oh, there we go. Now we're in business. Yeah, I guess it could be a broad. It could be a medium. But I got to tell you, it's super smooth. I mean, it is just like absolute joy to use. I think later today this will get cleaned out properly, and I'm going to give it a little bit of the shine with that sunshine cloth. Let me actually demo that for you right now. So if you have a plastic pen that's like a little scuffed up like this, you're not necessarily going to be able to take like a scratch like that out, but you can use the sunshine cloth and just basically polish that pen body, and the rouge inside the sunshine cloth will actually help you polish the plastic. So you can see it's a little bit better, but you still see those scratches. Again, I cannot emphasize to you all at home watching enough. When it comes to the world of vintage fountain pens, yes, you could spend the money to buy great examples, things in really good condition. However, sometimes you got to trade a little of those aesthetics to get something with a really great nib and have a really great writing experience, which is what brings me to our next pen in a moment. But here you can see, so like this is still a little dirty and scuffed up. This right here is much more what you would want, you know, if you were using a pen like that, right? Again, not the most expensive pen, not the most elaborate purchase, but you know, when I was shopping around and looking at this, there were other Parker 21s, but this one in particular struck me as the way to go. Beautiful. All right, let's look at this last pen. This last pen is actually a Parker from England, and it is marked, I don't know if you can see the imprint here, it's fairly faint, but it's marked Parker Junior Dualfold. Some of you may be aware that the Parker Dualfold was a model that existed in some form since like the 1920s. In England, they had this version of the Dualfold, I think, starting in the 40s. It is got some similar features to the Parker we just looked at and to other kind of Parkers from like the mid 20th century. Let me tell you a little bit about who I bought this from. So this actually, so it's Parker England, right? Which you don't often find in the United States all that much. I mean, people have them, but it's often something you find like fairly ubiquitous overseas. The gentleman who was selling this was I believe a fountain pen collector from Israel. He had a number of really interesting pens. I gravitated towards this, and I'll show you why in a second. But he had, I would say, a lot of user grades, but of some really interesting stuff. Like he had pens from like pre-1948 that were sold in like the British Mandate in Palestine. He had maybe Todds and things from England that, you know, maybe had some defects in it, but were still an interesting pen. I gravitated towards this one, and I did so despite the fact that, like, you can see there's like some teeth marks here. There's actually a crack right in the material. It doesn't go all the way through. It just sort of goes like around there. There's like a little chip. It's got to be something. I got to look out for that, but didn't really bother me. And also the price, you know, kind of accounted for all that. But what made me buy this is, as you watch this channel, if you know me already, but if you get to know me, you will learn that I love British fountain pens. And one of the reasons I love British fountain pens is the nibs. And the reason for that is twofold. One is British fountain pens have the tendency to be broader and have more like those italics and stubs and things like that. Second, there's something about the tipping on the British pens that just feels different than they did. And I'm just running this over the pen right now, and it's absolutely delightful. There's no ink or anything in it. But this one is really cool because it is a broad and it's extremely cursive looking. And the difference is oftentimes you see obliques from this era, from pens in England, where it's more stubby, meaning it's like got a thicker tip. It's a little more rounded on all the sides. Again, fodder for a future episode. However, this one is very cursive looking. And when I was taught to grind nibs, our grinding techniques are based on vintage pens. That is the kind of school I come from. And so when I look at this one, this looks like how I was sort of taught to make an oblique cursive italic. And I would say, well, we'll see how wide the line is. But you can see it's got a really beautiful angled cut there. It felt really great on the paper. Let's just dab that a little bit so it's not flooding onto the paper, and we'll give it a try. Ooh, yeah. I would say probably an oblique broad or double broad. Just look how wet and wonderful it is. It's got a little bit of bounce. It's super smooth, even though it's like fairly thin. and it's just absolutely delightful. And, you know, let me say, I paid $40 for this pen, right? It, like the Parker Super 21, which was also like a joy to write with, it is an aerometric filler. There is no reason anyone who is interested in experiencing various fountain pens should avoid pens like this. Yes, they're like, you know, 60, 70 years old at this point. Yes, they may have little cosmetic defects, scuffed up. This one obviously has a crack. But like for $40, like, I mean, if you buy a pen from China now, you know, it may cost you $40. But for $40 to be able to like have a writing experience from something that cannot ever be made again because we've lost so much of the industry to time, you know, not blaming anyone, just saying that's like the normal course of things. And, you know, to be able to basically write with this, like I could clean this out, flush it out using the filling system that's in here. I don't have to disassemble anything. I literally can put it in water, squeeze this, let it soak. Again, fodder for another time is how to clean fountain pens effectively. And be ready to fill it with ink and use it like day to day. And I have a bunch of pens like this, and this is just to me like what makes going on the hunt in a place like Brimfield absolutely joyous. The other thing I'll say is that I got to talk to the man who ran the booth, heard about, you know, his story. A lot of the times when I was going around talking to vendors, you know, like at a pen show, you know, you get to know different people. And that was the case there. So, you know, in addition to actual consumption part of it, there was like, you know, a camaraderie with various vendors for beautiful things from the past. So again, this one, just so you all know, is also going to be subject to the ability to give it a polish just using the sunshine cloth. So you can see like right there, and there's actually the imprint right there. So it's a junior Parker. That's what they call this size. But there's like some scuffs up here. And we can use the sunshine cloth just to start to polish that off. There are other materials that will allow you to kind of remove like the scuff that got created whenever it was capped, you know, like it caps down, presses on there. You know, you can see if we polish the cap ring, starts to regain some of its luster, and same with this. So with a few dollar investment, right, as we've seen, the kind of running theme of this is Josh likes pens. He'll buy things that are looking kind of dumpy, but with like a small investment, you know, you can kind of start to turn around the aesthetics fairly simply, and, you know, get pens that are just absolutely a joy to use. I have one more thing to show you. It's kind of the coup de grace, or the what's the French term? Pièce de résistance. That's it. I'm now going to take you to the pièce de résistance. Join me in a moment. So here is the pièce de résistance. And why do I say that? This, my friends, is, I believe, what is called a Victorian writing box or a campaign desk. It is a little bit damaged, but it's solid wood. It's missing some of the detailing. There's a crack over here. But that is not what makes this thing magical. What makes this thing magical is when you open it. And actually, I opened it backwards. So let me turn it around. So here it is. This is, and I've had to find a place to show you this in all its glory, right? This is a Victorian writing desk, campaign desk. The idea was that you would carry this with you, and then when it was time to write a letter, correspondence, dispatches, if you will, you would open it up and you'd have everything you need in here to write. So this is a leather, embossed leather writing pad. There's a Greek key pattern, I think you can see. But there's some other cool features. So first of all, I believe it has the original ink bottles, so you would put, you know, ink in there. You could have two different colors, I suppose. There's this piece right here that is concave, that's like a pen rest, and then you could store items in there. There was also a place to put objects there. But then the other thing is that it opened up, and so like within that there is a place, I guess, to store paper, and whatever else. I've never actually written on one of these, but it just was super cool. And then my favorite feature of this is that, you know, it has this incredible workmanship. Like someone made, potentially by hand, these kind of latches, like grooved it so that it would fit with the detailing in the wood. And so these latches open, and then unfortunately this part is missing where you would pick it up. This part has this is missing from here. There isn't a way to lift it, there we go. And you have another compartment in here where you can store various objects. And I mean, these parts that are enclosed, I mean, they look really great. They're a little dirty, a little stain there, but like the wood is super nice. So this was, to me, probably one of my most interesting finds, just because you don't really see them around all that much anymore. And so I was really jazzed. This was one of the things I carried around the fields for about a minute, but once I got done with that general area, I ran this back to my car to store it. I'm not going to attempt to write on it right now. I don't really have a dip pen. I'm not going to fill the ink, obviously, all that. But I think, you know, as finds go, this is probably one of the more interesting things, because they are not really seen all that much anymore. And I mean, people make things like it, but not with this level of detail. And you can see the metal fittings. This, I realized, you know, this side with the latches is the top. So you close it this way. There is these beautiful little things. I don't have the key, obviously, but it's like all beautiful brass. And marked in here, it says Brahman, B-R-A-M-A-N, Patent, London. So it's a British writing desk, British campaign desk, what have you, and has the initials, I believe it's a JM on the front. I may be misreading that. But yeah, that's it. This was the thing that I thought was probably the coolest to come away with. I know the Czech Obliterator was super nice, but you know. So those are the results of my hunt in the wild for fountain pens and other stationery and desk items. As you can see, I got some great stuff, really cool. Hopefully you thought it was as well, and I'm not just spinning my wheels talking about all this. As always, lots more to come on the channel. There's lots of things I want to explore, things to talk about, people to talk to. So please, if you like today's video, like. If you want more, subscribe. I will try to answer any comments in the comment section. And I want to thank everyone for coming on this journey with me. Thank you so much, and I'll see you very soon.